Millennial movie mob, cute the lights, let it roll. Yeah, we're diving in it all. Every frame, every job, breaking it down with the mob. Film analysis, yeah, we go deeper.
Okay, real talk. When I say the words, the never-ending story, something happens to you. Maybe it's a feeling in your chest. Maybe it's that synth opening. Maybe it's the image of a white luck dragon banking through the clouds. Or, let's be honest, maybe it's the horse. You know the one. Welcome back to Millennial Movie Mob. I'm your host, Amanda Blossom, and today we're going deep. I'm talking like embarrassingly deep on the never-ending story. In the 1984 film directed by Wolfgang Petersen, adapted from the novel by German author Michael Ende, and here's the thing, I have read the book, cover to cover, and my brain hasn't fully recovered. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're a kid watching Falkor flop around on a green screen. This story is not just a cute fantasy adventure. It's a Gnostic psychodrama about the death of imagination, the cost of forgetting, and whether or not love is the thing that ultimately holds the universe together. So buckle up. We're going to cover the movie, the visuals, the puppets, the absolutely unhinged tonal whiplash, and we're going to go into the book because the book is where the story really lives. And by the end, I want you to think about the name you'd give the childlike empress, because that question is not as cute as it sounds. Some context, the making of. Before we dive in, let's set the table a little. The Never-Ending Story, the novel, was written by Michael Ende and published in Germany in 1979. And this wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural phenomenon. People were reading it, adults, kids, everybody, and describing it as the kind of book that makes you feel like you understand the meaning of life. That's a big claim, and it held up. The film adaptation came out in 1984, and it was a German-American co-production. Bavaria Film and Neue Konstantin Film, distributed by Warner Brothers in the United States. Wolfgang Petersen directed it, the same guy who just a few years earlier had made Das Boot, which is one of the tensest war films ever committed to celluloid. So he brought this very grounded, very European sensibility to this fantastical material, which is part of why it feels so strange and so specific. The production was legitimately groundbreaking. Blue screen technology, what we now call green screen, was essentially invented for this film. The practical effects, the puppetry, the animatronics, they built Falkor. They built Morla. These weren't cartoons. These were massive, massive, elaborate, handcrafted creatures. The score was composed by Klaus Doldinger, with the iconic title song written and performed by Lamal, and Giorgio Moroder was involved too, which explains why it has that weird orchestral meets 80s synth pop energy that somehow completely works. Michael Ende was not happy with the film. I repeat, Michael Ende was not happy with the film, not even a little. He actually tried to have his name removed from it and sued the production company. He felt they had butchered his book, taken something deeply philosophical and spiritual and turned it into a fairly standard adventure story for kids. And he wasn't wrong, but we'll get into that. Box office-wise, it grossed around $100 million worldwide on a modest budget, making it one of the highest-grossing German films of its era. It spawned sequels that nobody particularly wants to talk about, and it became a genuine touchstone of 80s cinema. The story. What is this thing actually about? Okay, let's talk about the plot. We open on Bastian Balthazar Bucks, and that name alone should tell you this kid is carrying the weight of the universe. He's bullied, he's grieving his dead mother, His dad is emotionally checked out, drinking some kind of eggnog, egg and OJ blender concoction. Eggs and OJ, that's what it looks like, every morning, and giving him pep talks about keeping his feet on the ground. Bastian draws unicorns in his math notebook. He didn't try out for the swim team. He hasn't been turning in his homework. The movie opens with this gorgeous Lamal theme over moving clouds, and we see Bastien wake up and we see a picture of his dead mother. There is so much sadness packed into those first 2 minutes. His dad means well, but there's a gulf between them. All this unspoken grief just sitting at the breakfast table between the OJ smoothie and Bastien's peanut butter sandwich. On the way to school, Bastien gets chased by 3 bullies, thrown into a dumpster, escapes and hides in a used bookshop run by a grumpy old man who is genuinely surprised that this kid has actually read the books he names off. And then the old man leaves to take a phone call, and there it is, the never-ending story, sitting on the counter with this symbol on the cover, the Arin. And the book calls to Bastien. Literally, in the book, it calls to him. He steals it and runs. In the movie, though, Bastien's a little nicer. He leaves a note saying, "Don't worry, I'll return your book." In the book, he just runs. I've always thought the old man might have wanted him to take it. He's kind of smiling in the movie when Bastien runs out, but that's a theory for another day. Bastien hides in the school attic, skips his math test, drags the gym mats into a corner, and starts reading. And here's where the movie does something I love. Bastien looks tiny in the frame. This enormous dusty attic and this small sad kid with his stolen book and his sandwich. It's a beautiful visual metaphor. He's a small creature about to enter a very large world. And then we're in Fantasia, which is called Fantastica in the book, but for purposes of clarity, we're going to call it Fantasia throughout this podcast. And it's gorgeous. The colors, the landscapes, the creatures. A rock biter steamrolling through the forest. A night hob with his bat. A little man on a racing snail. They're all heading to the ivory tower because of a mysterious nothing that is destroying their world. The childlike empress in the ivory tower is the heart of Fantasia. She doesn't rule through force. She simply exists. And Fantasia exists around her. But something is wrong. The nothing is spreading. Great holes of emptiness where things used to be. Characters describe it in the book as going blind. You try to look at something and it's just gone. No dried up lake, no ruins, nothing. And the nothing is linked to the Empress's illness. As she fades, the nothing grows. A hero is called, a boy named Atreyu, 10 years old, from the Plains people. And he is chosen to go on a quest and find a cure for the Empress. He is given the Arin, a talisman that looks like 2 snakes eating each other's tails, the same talisman that's on the cover of the book, which lets him speak for the Empress and guides his path. He rides out on his horse Artex, and the quest begins. All right, WTF, this film is dark. Let's talk about the emotional devastation this movie casually delivers to children, because it is significant. The swamps of sadness. Anyone who lets the sadness gets to them sinks and dies. And Artex, Atreyu's horse, lets the sadness get to him and sinks. While Atreyu is screaming at him, begging him to fight it. Just fight it. The close-up of Atreyu trying to pull the horse out while crying is, we did not have the emotional infrastructure for this. None of us did. And this loss parallels Bastien's loss of his mother. The film is about grief as much as it's about imagination. Maybe more. Then there's Morla, the ancient one who lives in the swamp. Her shell looks like a mountain. She's apathetic about literally everything. The Empress, the nothing, existence. She speaks in wheeze, sneezes constantly because she's allergic to youth, and delivers what is essentially a nihilist philosophy lecture. Everything is born, lives and dies, nothing matters. She's hilarious, and she's also kind of terrifying because she's not wrong. Then there's Gamork, this werewolf-adjacent creature who is hunting Atreyu to stop the quest. In the movie, they fight and Atreyu kills him. In the book, and I'll get into the thematic implications here in a second, Atreyu doesn't kill him. That distinction matters because of what the Aran represents. It doesn't distinguish good from evil, and the bearer of the Aran doesn't use violence. The movie throws that out the window and has Atreyu stab the wolf, which is viscerally satisfying, but philosophically incorrect. Going a bit deeper in the book, what Gamork says is crucial. He explains that the nothing doesn't just destroy Fantasia, it transforms what it takes. Anything from Fantasia that falls into the nothing becomes a lie in the human world, a false belief, a baseless fear. Gamork isn't just a villain, he is despair. He serves the nothing willingly because despair does. And then there's that rockbiter scene, which isn't in the book at all, but it's one of the most devastating moments in the movie. The rockbiter is sitting alone after the nothing has taken everyone. He looks at his huge stone hands and says, and I'm paraphrasing, "They look like big, good, strong hands, don't they? I always thought that's what they were." He couldn't hold on to his friends. The nothing pulled them right out of his hands. A giant made of rock talking about the failure of strength in the face of grief. That's not a children's movie scene. That's an elegy. All right, let's talk about Atreyu's quest as a map of the psyche. Here's where I want to dig into the deeper stuff, and I want to give credit where credit's due. A lot of this Gnostic reading comes from the YouTube channel The Storyteller's Psyche, which is genuinely one of the best analyses of this story I've ever encountered. Go watch it. The argument is this: Atreyu's journey isn't just a fantasy quest. It's a map of the human psyche. Every trial is a fractal of the mind, a reflection of the internal landscape Bastian himself needs to traverse. The swamp of sadness is depression. The apathy of Morla is the kind of detachment that comes with prolonged grief, when you stop caring because caring hurts. Artek's sinking is the price of letting that sadness win. The Sphinx Gate in the film works like this. The Sphinxes keep their eyes closed, and if you don't feel your own worth, they open their eyes and shoot lasers and you die. In the book, it's different. They trap you into an endless loop of riddles. If you try to pass without wisdom and courage, either way, the game is shame. Fear of being judged unworthy, it is literally a gate made of the question, are you enough to be here? The magic mirror gate shows you your true self. And here's the kicker. Atreyu's true self is Bastian, which is the most meta and meaningful moment in the entire film if you sit with it. Brave people see that they are cowards. Kind people see cruelty. And Atreyu, this idealized hero, this pure projection of courage, sees a chubby, scared, bookish kid hiding in a school attic. What does that tell us? It tells us that Atreyu is Bastian's heroic self, the part of him that isn't afraid, and Bastian is Atreyu's truth. They need each other to be complete. The childlike empress, according to this reading, is the self, the core of the psyche, the sacred inner authority. She's not helpless, she's holy. She's dying because she's been forgotten, not because she's weak, but because the connection to her has been severed. The nothing is the absence of wonder. It's what happens when you stop telling stories, when imagination is left to rot, when you numb yourself and scroll through your feed and forget that you've ever dreamed. Falkor is a psychopomp, a guide of souls. In mythology, psychopomps escort the dead to the underworld. Falkor isn't a deus ex machina who shows up to save the day. He's the bridge that builds belief. In the unconscious realm, faith creates the path. Falkor exists because Atreyu refuses to give up. Gamork is the shadow, the Jungian concept of the part of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. He serves the nothing willingly because nihilism is what despair does when it stops fighting. He is the priest of the void. And the nothing itself? It's not a monster. It's forgetting. It's the anti-self. It grows when you stop telling stories, when you abandon your imagination, when you let grief calcify into apathy, the nothing moves in. It is the death of wonder. And wonder is not a luxury. It is load-bearing. Okay, why does the Empress need a new name? This is the central mystery of the story, and I want to spend some time here because it's not as simple as it looks. The childlike Empress needs a new name. Not a better name, not a more powerful name, a new one. And that name can only be given by a human child from beyond the boundaries of Fantasia. Why? Because she is the self, and the self can only be reanimated by the act of being named, of being recognized, acknowledged, believed in. She doesn't need to be saved by force. She needs to be seen. In the book, Bastian hesitates for a long time, and his reason is heartbreaking. He's afraid of what she'll think of him. The fat, scared, bullied little boy who gets thrown in dumpsters and doesn't turn in his homework. He is convinced he isn't worthy of this moment, that she'll be disappointed. But the Empress waits. She doesn't rush. She doesn't demand. The divine feminine in this story doesn't instruct. She invites. She remembers even when everyone else forgets. And when Bastian finally shouts her name, Moonchild, into the night, he isn't naming her, he's naming himself. He's saying, I am the one. This is my story. I believe. The storyteller's psyche puts it this way. The new name she needs is your name. The secret syllable only the heart remembers. You save her not by force, but by faith. And by calling to her, Bastian calls to the hidden self within him that his grief and his bullies and his father's well-meaning practicality have nearly buried. When he gives her a name, he resurrects a world. The act of naming is the act of creation. This is why this story is described as Gnostic. In Gnostic tradition, the Logos, the divine world, is the creative force of the universe. Bastian is the Logos, the word made flesh, the story made real. And here's the storyception layer that I cannot stop thinking about. As Bastian reads the book describes Bastian reading the book. The Empress even explains this to him. You are in the story, and others are in your story, watching you hide in the bookshop, watching you steal the book with the Aran on the cover. The story is aware of you. The story is aware of us. All right, let's talk about the movie versus the book, where it goes. Here's the thing. The movie only covers the first half of the book. It ends with Bastian giving Moonchild her name and riding Falkor through the real world, terrorizing his bullies, which is cute, fine, whatever. But the second half of the book is where Michael Ende really gets going, and it's dark and it's brilliant. The childlike empress gives Bastian the Aran and tells him he can make as many wishes as he wants. What she doesn't tell him, which, look, in retrospect seems like an oversight, is that every wish he makes costs him a memory. And when his last memory is gone, he's done, out of wishes, out of self. So Bastian starts wishing. He wishes for a beautiful forest. He wishes to be strong. He wishes for adventure, for fame, for Atreyu as a friend. He becomes handsome and powerful and beloved in all of Fantasia. And with every wish, he forgets a little more of who he was. The fat, scared, bullied kid starts to disappear, and he likes it. He starts to grow paranoid. He imagines Atreyu is disrespecting him. He wishes to be feared. He starts a pilgrimage to the ivory tower with thousands of followers pledging allegiance, and an evil sorceress named Zaid manipulates him at every turn. When Atreyu tries to steal the Aran back, for Bastian's own good, mind you, to save him from himself, Bastian banishes him. He wounds him in a battle at the ivory tower. He nearly declares himself emperor of Fantasia. This is Bastian as a cautionary tale. Power without love leads to ruin. The Aran was never meant to give him what he wanted. It was supposed to guide him toward what he needed. His desires shift slowly. He wishes for community and finds it hollow. He wishes to be loved and finds Dame Aola, a woman made of plants who loves him like a lost child. And sitting in that house, being loved, Bastian realizes what he actually wants. He wants to be able to love. Not just to receive love, but to give it. That is his final wish, and it is the wish that saves him. He makes it home, and his father is there, distraught. The grief that had been between them, the gulf, dissolves. Bastian returns not as a hero who has saved a fantasy land, but as a son who learned how to feel again. And by the way, in the book, Bastian's time in Fantasia lasted over 100 years. In the real world, only a day had passed. And when he goes back to the bookshop owner to confess that he stole the book, the old man reveals that he too had once visited Fantasia. They bond, they understand each other. And Bastian, as he grows into old age, never stops delighting in his ability to love. That's the story the movie doesn't tell, and it's the story I wish everybody knew. All right, let's talk about the actual movie. Let's give the film its due, because it really does deserve it in a lot of ways. Visually, the movie is stunning. Joost Vakano's cinematography frames Fantasia like a living painting. Every landscape, the northern plains, the swamps of sadness, the ivory tower, feels vast and surreal and real all at once. And the practical effects, the puppetry. Morla is a giant animatronic turtle that somehow conveys exhausted ancient apathy. Falkor is not the most convincing physical object in cinema history, but there is something about his face, his expression, that is genuinely warm and joyful. You buy it, but you buy it because you want to. Some of the actors were dubbed in the English version. Atreyu was dubbed because they wanted a stronger voice, and it does occasionally feel a little off. But the emotional beats still land. Noah Hathaway's Atreyu is earnest and vulnerable and genuinely brave-looking. Barrett Oliver's Bastian is perfectly awkward and sad, though not fat the way he was in the book. And Tammy Stronach as the childlike empress? She has this ethereal, almost divine presence that is completely right. She would go on to become a dancer and choreographer. The fact that she conveyed that presence almost entirely through stillness and her eyes makes it that much more impressive. The score. Klaus Doldinger's orchestral score gives Fantasia its majesty, and then the Lamal theme gives it its heartache. That combination of orchestral fantasy and 80s synth pop has no right to work as well as it does. And yet, I have had the song in my head for approximately 40 years. I expect to die with it in my head. What doesn't work? Well, some of the pacing feels rushed. You can feel the compression of the book, particularly in the middle section where Atreyu leaps from location to location, and the tonal whiplash is real. You go from the Artex scene, which is genuinely traumatic, to Falkor flying through the sky in what looks like the world's most cheerful foam sculpture, and your emotional system just kind of short circuits. But here's the thing, the tonal weirdness might actually be intentional. This is a film that respects children enough to show them depression, nihilism, mortality, and the existential threat of forgetting, and then turns around and gives them a luck dragon. That's not inconsistency, that's the full emotional palette of being alive. All right, did it age well? In terms of themes, shockingly well. Maybe more relevant now than ever. The nothing, the death of imagination, the flattening of wonder, the collective forgetting, feels more real in 2026 than it did in 1984. The internet, social media, the algorithmic reduction of everything to content, the nothing is literally your feed. It's the absence of wonder, the homogenization of experience. And this movie made that argument 40 years ago, filtered through a German fantasy novel and aimed at 10-year-olds. In terms of effects, some of it is charming in its datedness, and some of it genuinely holds up. Morla is still great. Falkor is still Falkor. The blue screenshots of Falkor flying have aged, shall we say, characteristically for 1984. But practical effects have always had a physicality that CGI struggles to replicate. You feel the weight of Morla in ways you never feel a digital creature. What hasn't aged is the emotional core, the grief, the distance between Bastian and his father, the way a child uses stories to survive loss. That is timeless. That will be timeless forever. Final verdict. Here's where I stand on this. The NeverEnding Story, the film, is a flawed, beautiful, genuinely strange piece of cinema that somehow captures maybe a third of what the book is doing and still manages to be one of the most emotionally resonant fantasy films ever made. It is a warning. It is a ritual. It is a dare. It lives in the stories you tell, the dreams you protect, the imagination you refuse to let the nothing eat. The book is something else entirely. The book is a complete philosophy of what it means to be human. And its conclusion, the thing that ultimately saves us, is not power or strength or imagination, but love, the desire to be loved, and the willingness to love in return. It's not a small claim, it's an enormous one, and Michael Ende earns it. Wolfgang Petersen captured the adventure. He captured some of the sadness. He didn't capture the love. And that's okay. The book is still there. It's not going anywhere. So here's your homework. Go watch the movie if you haven't in a while. Notice the rockbiter's hands. Notice how small Bastian looks in the attic. Notice the way the Empress waits. Then go read the book, because the book will ask you something the movie doesn't. What is the name only you can give? The one buried under shame, under grief, under the voice that says, keep your feet on the ground. The secret syllable only your heart remembers. Speak it, write it, live it. And that's it for this episode of Millennial Movie Mob. If this hits you in the feels, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone who still has a picture of their mom on their wall. I'm gonna go eat a peanut butter sandwich and stare at the clouds. I'll see you next time. Don't let the nothing win.
Thank you for listening to Millennial Movie Mob. We broke it down, that's our job. If you enjoyed what you heard, like, follow, and share. Spread the word.